Ewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, overcoming adversity and thriving against all odds. Attention. This episode touches on sensitive topics such as poverty, homelessness, parental mental illness, and foster care. Listener discretion is advised. For my guest David and his two siblings, their mother's mental illness, paranoid schizophrenia, brings with it poverty, violence, and instability. They travel through New York and neighboring areas seeking shelter. They find it in train stations, 24-hour diners, anywhere warm and dry. The first 11 years of his life, David was homeless. Then he was placed in foster care. At first, it feels like salvation, but soon proved to be just as unsafe for him. As a gay child, David's coming of age is further marked by anti-gay abuse at the hands of caregivers and therapists. In the face of deprivation and abuse, David harnesses an inner grit to escape the all-too-familiar outcome for a kid like him. He finds hope and opportunity in libraries, schools, and the occasional kind-hearted adult. Through determination and hard work, he's able to get a scholarship to Vassar College, his first step out of poverty. Then he later graduates from UCLA Law School with a vision of changing the laws that affect children in poverty. I was truly honored to speak with David Ambroz. He is a national poverty and child welfare expert and advocate. He was recognized by President Obama as an American champion of change. He currently serves as the head of community engagement for Amazon, coordinating with nonprofits and community leaders for social good. Previously, he led corporate social responsibility for Walt Disney Television and served as the president of Los Angeles City Planning Commission and as a California Child Welfare Council member. He is a foster dad and he lives in Los Angeles, California. If you're listening in real time, he has a new book coming out this week. It's called A Place Called Home, a memoir. I really enjoyed talking to David about how his childhood experience with homelessness shaped him and how he managed to not only survive, but thrive in adulthood. We discussed what people get right and get wrong about childhood poverty, how to create ground-up change in foster care system, how to encourage more educated middle-class families to foster, and effective ways anyone can help improve the lives of foster kids. Did you know that there are 2.5 million homeless children in America? I want to say a few words about David's book. If you're like me, then you love reading memoirs. A Place Called Home is written beautifully with descriptive, rich language. It's riveting. I couldn't put it down. It was like watching a movie. I highly recommend it. It's a story of triumph and transformation. At first glance, it's a story destined to end in tragedy that magically has a happy ending. I was rooting for David. I am adding this book to my best books I've read in 2022 list. It's a heart-wrenching yet inspiring story. Since we're talking about books, may I recommend 2 additional resources, 2 of my absolute favorite books. Number 1, Supernormal, The Untold Story of Adversity and Resilience by Meg J. Ptsd. a phenomenal book. And another fantastic must-read, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, and Other Stories from a Childhood Psychiatrist's Notebook, What Traumatized Children Can Teach Us About Loss, Love, and Healing by amazing Bruce Perry. The topic of poverty and homelessness is very close to my heart. I work with people who were in foster care, as well as who have kids in foster care, and they're trying to regain custody of their kids currently. Several years ago, I also volunteered in a homeless shelter where I taught parenting workshops. Maybe someday I'll tell you about that experience. And of course, the big one. Early in my career, I have worked with homeless children, beggars, youth at risk in a correctional facility, an experience that truly changed me and shaped the trajectory of my life. While I thought I could relate to David's story professionally, little did I know that it would end up being unexpectedly personal. I saw myself in his story, and many of the forgotten stories of my life resurfaced. It shows how our stories of early childhood adversity, regardless of circumstances, have a common story arc. This is why I love Meg Jay's book, Supernormal. Supernormal is a term she uses to describe people like David and myself. I want to read a short paragraph from Meg's book. Page 5, quote, "According to the American Psychological Association, resilience is adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, or significant ongoing stressors. Researchers say it is unexpected competence despite significant risks. It is achieving success despite serious challenges. No matter how exactly one chooses to phrase it, resilience is doing better than one might expect. It is making good when much has been bad. Certainly, after all she had been through, Helen had made good. She had adapted well, and she was more competent and successful than many may have predicted. So why then did Helen not think of herself as resilient? The problem is that colloquially, we talk about resilience in deceptively simple terms. We say people who are resilient bounce back, they rebound. And if we look in the dictionary, we see resilience defined as elasticity, as the ability to recover quickly and easily, to return to one's original state after an illness or misfortune or shock. There are all sorts of situations for which this kind of springy definition makes sense, such as when we rebound from having the flu or we bounce back from losing a job. But none of these popular descriptions matches what goes on inside those like Helen, most of whom do not recover quickly or return to their original state, but are forever changed by their early experiences. When it comes to overcoming childhood adversity, resilience is no snap. End of quote. And this is why I love the term supernormal as opposed to resilient. Please enjoy this heartwarming, inspiring conversation with David Ambroz. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today about my memoir.
Yeah, I want to start with the title, A Place Called Home. I always wonder where my home is, since I lived in multiple countries, in multiple places. I was homeless. I lived in a temporary shelter. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, what's the place that you call home? And has that evolved, that definition of home, over the years for you? Because for me, it definitely has. I want to know your thoughts about that. What is home? Where is home?
I think for millions of children that are still homeless today, or struggling, or couch surfing, or whose families are struggling and have housing insecurity, home is an evolving concept. And at every epoch, every different time period of my life, the thought of what it means and has meant has changed. I'm talking to you today from my home that I own in Los Angeles. And it is 4 beautiful walls and a roof that I'm very happy with. But it's also a blank canvas. And I think what I've learned over the years that I started understanding right in the first chapter is that home is people. And most importantly, is yourself. I often had to find corners in my home and my heart and my head to get through horrible moments that threatened to overwhelm my walls. And I was able to find that space in my home to get through it and seek shelter in myself. Over time, I learned that you could invite others in, that you could curate and cultivate a family in addition to the one you're given, to the one that you love and you kind of nurture. So home for me ultimately became loving myself and deriving within myself the power to self-love, to say that I am valid, that I am worthy of love, that I did nothing wrong, not ever in my life, but certainly as a child to deserve what went on. So I think I would say in my early middle age, I've come to understand that home has been and always will be within myself.
Yeah, I can relate. I want to read a couple of sentences to open our conversation right from the first chapter even. I highlighted from the first couple of chapters, actually, because that's where I want to start this conversation. You write, Mom, I try to get her attention, but it's futile when she's in this mood. My siblings have not spoken for hours. There is no joking around or whining, no annoying each other, no pestering Mom about where we're going. We know to be quiet and obedient when she's in this state, but I have to try something. Another one, there is a calculation I make whenever I talk to Mom. Will she hit me? And is it worth it? Asking for candy bar isn't worth it. Mom stops and looks at me for the first time in hours. She's going to hit me. Is she going to hit me? I can usually tell, but not tonight. So, and I can read many this kind of sentences from the book, but what was it like growing up with a mom who was not mentally stable and healthy, and it was unpredictable, uncertain? As a kid, I would love for you to share that experience. I think it's important for the listener because many of us come into parenthood with a lot of trauma and we repeat those patterns, what we haven't healed. And our kids are on the receiving end of our mood, our instability, our unpredictability, our rage and anger, but also love and nourishment. Like you write in the other parts of the book, that you wanted love and you wanted only from her. I couldn't find that line. I should have highlighted. There was a beautiful line. So what was it like growing up? Like now that you look back?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when we look out and we walk along the streets of Los Angeles or any urban area, really, and you see the kind of bedraggled homeless people and the families, when you walk by that car that's overpacked with possessions and you look inside to see if there's someone living in the car, you are looking into somebody who's in distress. You're looking into a family and you're peeking into a world that you may think you understand, but we don't. Every family, every situation, every individual and their mental health journey is so unique. As a class, as a country, as a people, and I would even say as a world, I couldn't speak, I didn't grow up overseas. We treat mental illness as some sort of pariah. We have so much shame about anything to do with mental illness. And so when we are dealing with our own children, we try, I believe, to hide anything that we think of as vulnerability. And I'll more directly answer your question, but a quick story is I became a foster father. And when I was 12-ish, if you've read in the book, I went into a group home facility for delinquents and I was assaulted. And I never cried from 12 until my mid 30s, not once, not one tear. And I didn't realize why or how one does that. It just was something that happened to me. And my foster son was furious with me at one point, and he helped me understand that being invulnerable made him feel like he couldn't mourn the experiences that he had had as a child. And that made him angry and hurt that I told him to get over it, essentially. So I cry all the time now. We'll probably cry today. And I realized that emotion is a superpower. My mom, like many people suffering from mental illness that's untreated, did the best that she damn well could. And a lot of the reaction I've gotten from folks has been really anger towards my mom. I don't have anger towards my mom. My mom did the best she could with 3 children. I wouldn't be mad at my mom if she had cancer, God forbid. My mom has a disease, and I don't know why I feel this way or if I always felt this way. First of all, she's my mother. Second of all, she's my mother. And finally, she's my mom. And regardless of what our parents do to us, we want their love and we want to love them. It was a high wire act growing up with my mother. It was a high wire act. And not just because of her, because of the situations we were in. I relied on this individual to take care of us in an openly hostile war zone. And she's not reliable. And that hurt profoundly. We expect our parents to care for us. We expect them to take care of our basic needs. And I never did, although I wanted it. So it was really hard, but I take care of my mom today. And I love my mom. Yeah, take care of her. She's doing well. She still suffers, but she's no longer homeless and is getting treatment. But I love my mom deeply. And I think a lot of kids that you probably worked with have families that deal with this issue. And we need to remove the shame and realize that every human has some sort of mental health opportunity. Like all of us could work out harder, right? All of us could run another mile. I think all of us could work harder on our mental health and talk about it. So I do. I'm very open with my mental health issues as they were, just sadness about the childhood, things of that nature. So thank you for asking that question. I hope folks, when they read it, love my mom as much as I do.
Yeah, it's understandable. I mean, I have compassion for her as I read through the pages that she's not giving up. She's always fighting that whatever battle that she's fighting. And she's also in it, right? It's not like she's neglecting you. She's taking you with her and going through all the things that she's doing, going places, and this survival, you can see she's doing it for her kids. Even sometimes she emerges like when she wants to cook a healthy meal and she puts you into school and she volunteers. You can see the glimpses of that. And it's like so hopeful, but you write that you knew from early on that that's not going to last. I mean, you begged, you stole, you lived on the streets, you were homeless. You went through a lot. What I want to know is how did all of those conditions shape you, who you are as a result of those experiences, in terms of like what superpowers did you acquire today that you can say it's as a result of those experiences? I mean, living with unpredictability, instability, uncertainty, taking care of your mom, even though you were the youngest, but you were cleaning the house, making sure everyone was okay. And then once you have a pet and you're taking care of it. So who are you today as a result of those experiences? That's my number one question.
Well, I want to just start with thanking you for the question, because what you didn't start with is, why are you such a sad individual that's broken? Instead, you approach it as I do, which is, how did your experiences make you the strong person that you are today? What is your superpower, you said? And that's exactly how I think of people that experience challenges. That's how I think of foster kids, my people, who are every ethnicity, from every country, from every economic class. We are a people, and we're spread amongst everyone. And I think we do have superpower. I think we, as a group of people, are constantly deploying that superpower to survive. And we don't think of it as superpower at first. I am resilient. And I am resilient. This book did not magically get published. I'm resilient because I knew that my story was important to tell, because I needed to have read this story when I was young. I needed my social worker to have read it. I needed the potential person listening today who's not going to become a foster parent, but maybe will go to the website, my website, click a button and figure out how they can do anything. I knew this story was worth sharing. I am resilient. I like to say my superpower is one of them is figuring it out. Whatever challenge I am confronted with, I don't become overwhelmed. And I see a lot of folks who are just confronted with whatever the case may be. And for me, I'm able to not become overwhelmed by that, but just figure it out. Stop, look at the problem as it exists. And that, I think, is a direct result of where's my next meal coming from? Is this not my mom, but is this other individual going to harm me? How are they going to harm me? What am I going to do after they harm me? Oh, look, another school that I'm not going to. I remember coming out of foster care and looking back and realizing that I had been to just a few years of school over my life. And yet here I am. I have a doctorate. I have a law degree. My sister has a master's. My brother has a master's. We figured it out. And I think most children have an inner grit and resiliency that with the right amount of love and support, we can all reach our full potential, no matter what trauma we go through. Our full potential may not be a doctorate. Our full potential may be a very honorable blue collar job, which I consider very honorable. But whatever that is, I think one of our superpowers as a people is that because of the way we're brought up, the way we're trained, we have a grit and resiliency that can be just amazing. And I would just say I could talk all day about what I think about foster kids and kids that experience this. But the third one is, I think, a deep sense and desire to both be loved and to love. I think we understand in a way that if it's kind of passively, quietly background noise, it's beautiful. And I hope most kids experience that. But if it's absent or occasionally present in dramatic ways, that we have an awareness of the power of deploying love and being loved and self-love that is unique. Those things don't magically happen. It took a lot of therapy and people in my life to help me get to this point. But I think there's so many skills that kids that come through trauma have. I look at the streets today in Los Angeles where I live, and I think we're doing a lot to try and fix this homelessness problem. But I look at those kids and I wonder, when I walk through Hollywood or downtown or wherever, I wonder where they're going to go. I wonder where they're going to sleep tonight. I wonder what they're going to experience. And when I'm 60 or 70, I wonder what they're going to be doing. Are they going to be on this podcast with your successor, having a conversation about modern homelessness in the 2020s? I'm so bullish on the potential of people that go through trauma to contribute with the right amount of healing and love.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure there are other skills that you can write a whole book about. How about the other flip side of that, like the trauma, the PTSD side of things? Have you noticed in your life being hypervigilant, suspicious of things? How do you deal with unpredictability, uncertainty? You mentioned in there, like you used to see policemen and have a different reaction, even though now you live in neighborhoods where police are helping. So I'm also curious about that other side. And how do you silence if those traits come up, like hypervigilance or alertness, or how those skills show up, and what do you do to hush them because you live in a comfortable, stable place right now?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a true statistic that addresses your question, at least in part. More foster kids will go to jail than to college. I'm just going to give that space. More foster kids will become homeless than go to college. More foster girls will have a child within a couple of years of leaving foster care than go to college. Are we okay with that? And what are the things that we are carrying forward as a group of young people that are leading us to have these experiences that are not necessarily what we would choose with the right amount of intervention? So do I carry certain elements of PTSD? Absolutely. The rate of PTSD amongst, and for folks who don't know, post-traumatic stress disorder, the rate for that for foster kids is higher than people that have served overseas in our military. Let that sink in. We are raising a generation of kids that have a higher rate of PTSD than our military. Are we okay with that? What is the cost morally and economically to our country? It's incalculable. So I definitely carry elements of that with me to this day. But as I mentioned earlier, and with no shame, I have sought really wonderful mental health in my life. I am a product of addressing things head on, and I've dealt with a lot of that. Do I still have it? Absolutely. I sometimes think I'm wired to fight. And I'll tell you one funny way that manifests in writing this book or trying to help get it, people aware of it. You get a lot of no's. Like, I'm sure you as a creative individual in your life, when you wanted to start this or do this or continue this, the default answer for everybody is no, right? We walk around every day and we can't say yes to everything. In fact, if you look at it, you probably say no to most things. When I was a foster kid or when I was homeless, no was just kind of the world I operated in. No, you can't have a house. No, you can't have two parents. No, you can't have a meal. No, you don't get to be clean. No, 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 no. No, you can't sleep here. No, you can't bathe here. No is the default state. I always look at no as a request for more information. And that has served me very well. No is something to be overcome in terms of people denying you a core need. And so I have had to learn that that is a skill, but no is also okay to both acknowledge, accept, as well as to give. You can't say yes to everything, but my skill to figure it out and get people past a no to a yes is something that has served me incredibly well in my life. And it is, one might say, a direct outcome of the way I was raised. I think the things like hypervigilance and the other elements of different traumas, I absolutely have elements of that. I could tell you some of the nightmares I have sometimes. Those things are still with me. I'm human. And for whatever reason, despite all my best efforts, they still stay with me. When I talk to my mom, when I see my mom, I sometimes, become, as we say in New York City, verklempt, somewhat overwhelmed and unable to speak. So they absolutely stick with me. But I'll tell you, having my foster son in my life and seeing my siblings raise their kids, some of what we do is carrying forward that trauma, but some of what we do is directly to contravene it. And that has served all of us well. We have healthy children that are all doing relatively well in their own way. It definitely has been a burden I've carried, especially as I approach my mid-30s. I was able to really address it. And that has served me incredibly well to be able to love more openly, to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is something very interesting for, I think, trauma, where much like yoga, you have to practice vulnerability. You have to think, how am I getting in this pose? Am I flexible enough to be in this pose? What if I fall over? Are people going to laugh at me? The answer is, it sucks, yes, and maybe. And it's totally fine. You're going to survive. So practicing vulnerability is one example of something that since I really woke up, I have done. And I'll give you this final answer. When I was in therapy, I was trying to figure out, like, how did I process things? What's my coping mechanism with the world? I served in the planning commission for Los Angeles, and people are very, I would say lightly, grumpy about development in their neighborhood or grumpy about whatever. And much like my childhood, people get very angry. And I would sit up there in this committee that I served on, and people would really fight projects they didn't like. And at the same time, I was trying to go through therapy to figure out my childhood, my life, where I was. And I came up with this very powerful visual. So my entire life, I really took all the different traumas that came at me and I put them in a clear plastic bin that I could see through, that I labeled, and then I put on an index card in my filing system. So I knew where they were. I could deal with anything that came at me. I acknowledged them, wasn't denying, but I didn't have to feel them. And so
because it's too painful and too overwhelming, you have to compartmentalize, otherwise you won't survive, because survival was the first priority. You can't do both. You can't do survival and healing at the same time.
But my shelf broke. And in my mid-30s, my way that I approached the world, which was to do that filing, no longer was available to me. And all the things that I previously filed away came tumbling down. And they insisted on being felt. So I was able to come up with a different mechanism, which is not to deny a feeling or just intellectualize everything, but just be like, that hurt. And to mourn my childhood and to mourn the things that were done to me. And that has been very powerful. And it's a discipline like yoga. You have to practice that vulnerability. My mechanism is no longer filing things away not to feel. That's also a privilege I have because of the way that I live my life now. I'm safe and secure. And I've built a community that gives me that safety. So I hope that answered a little bit of the what do I carry forward question.
No, it's so profound what you just said. I think without safety and security, you can't do that. And yeah, you're right. It is a privilege of sort to have that. Unfortunately, I wish all children were safe to thrive, but it's not the case. Vulnerability is vulnerability, I think, is one of the things that I've learned to practice more and more, just like you, and you become more agile with it. And you learn that it's not going to bite you in the backside, and it's okay. But I think for people like us who were traumatized deeply, grew up in turbulent, they had turbulent childhood, then unpredictable. I think the main thing is to compartmentalize. I love that metaphor of the clear boxes with the little labels. It's so true. You're laughing, but it is so true.
Yeah.
And then you're right. One day the shelf breaks and the weight comes down and you are ought to face with it. And it's like all at once. It's too much. I think that's one of the biggest skills I want to instill in my kid, or I want to teach other people to do, is to help their children to be okay with feelings, to welcome all feelings, to experience, to feel, to express feelings, because ultimately that's who you are, right? That's your authentic self. It's your inner world. That's how you perceive the world. That's how you react to things. And if you don't have someone who can listen or hold space, or if they shut down your feelings, or if you don't have time because survival or space to even feel feelings, because survival is a more important priority. That's what the trauma is, right? This connection from your true self, not feeling your feelings as they rise. Then you learn not only you disconnect from yourself, then you're also unable to connect to other people. If you see their pain, if you see their joy, right? It's like hard to connect to other people's feelings when you are not dealt with your own. So it's like a double trauma almost. You get traumatized, you disconnect from yourself, you don't feel your own feelings, you're not this authentic individual, then it hurts you in your own parenting, in your relationships, because you can't fully be intimate or connect with others or derive joy from things and life, or connect to other people's pain. And it's just like that in and of itself is another adversity.
Yeah, I think I can't wait to listen to this episode, because that is such a well described. And even when the person is holding a hand out to help and love, even when it's not a fist, it's still impossible, because you can't feel that. You can't feel that acceptance and love there. I don't know if you've gotten to it, but there's this woman who became my foster mom, and she fought to get me, wasn't a foster parent. And there's a scene where in a different foster home, they had used food as a weapon. They had starved me to decrease my rambunctiousness. When you're hungry, you can't really be rambunctious, or you can't think. So when I came into this new home, I really had a complicated relationship with food. I was skeletal and I was a mess. And this woman, and you can't see it at home, but there she is. That's the foster family. And I have one of these beautiful foster families that Holly, is her name, fought to get me into her custody for more than a year. And when I got into her custody, and all she wanted to do was to love me and for me to be myself, it took years. So it's not just that you can't accept the pain, you have to file it away. Even when it's a pleasant thing, that coping mechanism, that authenticity is not possible. And Holly did her damnedest to overcome those walls. And I wouldn't be here today without her early work. But it took many individuals and myself to finally bring down those walls.
Wow. Wow, I can say so many things, and I can relate to the food part. It brought up something personal for me. As I said, this book brought up so much personal. I'm going to start with that. After the earthquake, we were shipped to a different country to live with far relatives who were rich and wealthy, but it wasn't the rich life that we were given. There were lots of rules and things, and food was given very by prescription. And when I was reading the story of Aunt Flora in your book, and now that you're mentioning, and I was very skinny and skeletal because I wasn't eating because food wasn't given to us. So that brought up that personal thing for me. But another thing, yeah, if you were not given, it's hard to receive. If it's because giving and receiving are the same thing, right? If I was given love and I know how to receive it, then I would be able to give it. I think the trauma a lot of parents have is their children's big emotions or their children's anger or uncomfortable feelings creates this discomfort, and they become enraged or they become disconnected from their children. They don't want to, they withdraw their love. It's because of that reason. Because motherhood, parenthood, as you know, you're a foster parent, it's all about giving, right? You give relentlessly, especially in the beginning years when children don't give us or talk to us or reward us with anything. So that part could be very re-traumatizing for a lot of folks who are not used to giving or receiving, right? Because it's the same wound. But why does it take so long to foster a child? Why is the system so messed up? Even the people, like, she had to fight for you for so many months. Why is it so hard? And let's talk about foster care a little bit, about the laws and regulations, like who can foster children. I think people are not educated. We don't know much about this.
Sure. Well, I'll start with something that I'll start my comments by saying that right now, today, in the United States of America, we have the best system we've ever had, ever. Most transparent, most successful, most aware of its inequities and issues. And we have a lot of work still to do. And the system, this thing seems so out there, not of us. But I ask folks to close their eyes and picture their own child. And they have to put their child tomorrow in foster care. What does foster care look like? And then to realize you do have a child in foster care. You have hundreds of thousands of children in foster care. And we need to create the system that you were just thinking of. The other reality is we need to put down the pitchforks and stop coming after Frankenstein, because we created him. The system that exists today is mostly from our own neglect. People don't even know much about foster care, yet these are the state's children. We have given the state the power to disrupt and break up families. That is a violent and powerful thing. And we should be very covetous and mindful of giving government that much power. I'm all for it. Let me be very clear. But as citizens in this democracy, in this republic, we must pay closer attention when we allow the government to break up families. 2/3 of foster kids, roughly, are put into foster care for neglect. Neglect is a euphemism for poverty. Poverty is a euphemism for many things, including racism. What if we stopped taking kids out of homes because their parents could not care for them? What if instead we wrapped our arms around parents and helped preserve families? For sure, took kids away like my siblings. There was no way we could have stayed with my mom. But if we could remove some of the pressure from foster care by helping preserve families, wouldn't that be something? Then foster care could do more serious work for the folks that need it the most. So the system is us. We are Soylent Green. We must begin to realize that these are our children. When you close your eyes and you think about putting your kid in foster care, tomorrow we could have that. We put a man on the moon. We can figure out how not to have homeless children in this country. We can figure out how to have foster kids, not more of them go to prison than college. My afterword of my book, which I hope folks will pick up, is policy. It is a very approachable policy prescription for how to address the worst parts of foster care. It's so doable. I'll give you just one example. Why don't middle-class people foster?
Yeah, why?
Well,
because I think the common perception is it's only poor people foster because they get money from the government or they get services and things like that. I think that's like a common knowledge because I work with people whose kids are in foster care. And so I think that's the perception out there, right?
I definitely think it's perception, and and we could talk about the perception, but what I would like folks to
I would like
focus
to,
on.
yes, I would like to foster a child, for example. I've thought about that before because I deeply care about children. Like, that's what, but with me, one individual, that's not going to help, right? This has to be.
But it will, because here's the reality. Middle class people, roughly, let's say upper income middle class people, everyone thinks they're middle class, but there's numbers involved in that calculation. Let's just say that you're not struggling, but you're not vacationing in the south of France. Middle class people are confronted with issues around retirement. How are they going to retire? How are they going to put their kids through school? Can they afford healthcare? Do they have any savings at all to deal with things that rise? What if we made a couple thousand people federal employees for reasons of pension, healthcare, and gave their kids free college? You've just removed the three biggest burdens in modern middle class life. And you're talking about a couple thousand people to deal with the number of kids that are in foster care. It's nothing. The federal workforce is millions. If you had just a couple tens of thousands more foster families come into the system, not only would it be better for the foster child, it'd be better for all of us collectively. And the cost is minimal. And the reason it's important is not just that we want to respect and be grateful for people that foster now instead of constantly throwing stones at them because we're not doing it. Stop criticizing them. Do something. That's powerful. But let's bring other people to the table. Bless those people for opening their homes. I don't want to talk about their motives. I want to thank them for their service and bring other people to do it. Why don't those other people do it? Let's address that problem. Let's focus our energy on that. How do we get a policymaker to support it so that you, as a middle-class individual, if after 5 years of good service, your child will go to University of California, Los Angeles for free. You will retire at 65 as part of the federal pension system. It costs us almost nothing. It helps us take care of these children that are our children. We could begin to address that. And not only is that good because it's good, those folks that come in like yourself and myself have political power. So when you come into the system and you're confronted by an issue that makes no sense to you, you're going to call your legislator. You're going to be like, hey, assembly person, why can't my kid go to a sleepover without the entire house over there going through something called a live scan, which is a background check? That's absurd. That is going to make my kid feel like an alien. He's not going to be able to bond. I want you to fix that so that I am able to let my kid go on a sleepover like a normal child. All of those things are fixable, but we need folks to push the political process to be different. And currently, the political power is not where it needs to be. So not only is it good to have middle-class people foster for all the reasons we discussed, but it also is going to help us change the system long-term to constantly create a feedback mechanism. We could talk about foster parents. We could talk about biological families. We could talk about social workers and the foster kids themselves. The entire afterword looks at each of those groups and what we can do to change the system.
Wow. Can you tell, since we're talking about this, on your website, how people can learn more and participate? I know you have a lot of options there. I think this is a good place to plug that.
Thank you for that. So davidambroz.com, and Ambroz is AMBROZ as in zebra.com, has a couple different things there. One, you can, of course, buy the memoir. The other piece is a tab called Activism. And when you click through there, you're going to see what I've been up to, but you also get a link to a nonprofit that I founded called Foster More. And what Foster More is all about is, if you think about 20 years ago, who talked about breast cancer 30 years ago? It wasn't half the species problem. It was dark and depressing. Today, it is a movement that we're all part of. And it's our collective responsibility to find the cure. We all know that. We're all aware of the color. And regardless of what you think, it's been a powerful movement. Foster More said, what if we could engage the public in this conversation in a way that we've never done before, where they feel alienated or hopeless or throwing sticks at people that do it currently? What if we engage them and give them the power to contribute even just their attention? So we have a whole buffet. You can go up. You don't have to get the broccoli if you don't want the broccoli, but hopefully you get the broccoli. there is a whole buffet of options for you to get engaged. Give $1 to the National Scholarship Fund, become a special court-appointed special advocate, which is basically it's like a big brother, big sister position. Become a foster parent, do a digital mentoring. There's so many ways that you can get involved in so many organizations. So Foster More was kind of the creation to rebrand foster care, to create a United Nations of nonprofits doing great work around the country to serve these kids, and to bring down the barriers so Joe Q Public could find a way to get in there. So if you link through my website, you can go through and do that. We have been all across the country successful in recruiting foster parents. We've given away more than $6 million in scholarship funds to foster kids to pursue vocational 2-year, 4-year education. We've done PSAs that have seen hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of airtime. The whole idea is there. And I'll leave you this final one, which is everybody here listening probably works. We created something called the Foster Friendly Workplace Certification. So let's say you can't foster, you can't become a volunteer. There are 10 policies that would allow you to get the certification, and they're free. Basically, just to give you, for instance, what if you have a foster parent that works for you? What if they get a placement and they need to go to court? I mean, did they take vacation? Here they are doing a public service, working for you, and we're penalizing them. What if their foster kid gets placed with them? They don't have bonding time unless it's their biological kid or unless they adopt it. You need the time to stabilize the kid in the house. There are policies we can create that honor what we're trying to do with biological children or adopted with foster children. So the Foster Friendly Workplace Certification, all of us can go to our whatever our company is, a restaurant, our nonprofit, our own podcast, and we could say, we are going to get certified. It is a simple process and it's free. We've had CBS Viacom, we've had major American companies go through the process, and it's very simple. So the website, davidambroz.com, you'll see activism. You can go through there to find out all of this and more on how you can do something, which I hope all of us will do.
I know. It's so great that there are multiple options, and just fostering a kid is not the only. Like I wasn't aware of all of the other options. I'm so glad you are talking about it, because it could be daunting, right? If you hear how you can help, if you don't want to foster a child, there's so many small ways that you can be involved and, like you said, make a difference truly.
So I talk for 10 minutes and you have a beautiful way of summarizing what I'm saying. So you've done this before. My favorite campaign we're doing right now, I think you'll enjoy this, is it's called Donate Your Small Talk. And it's on the website, davidambroz.com. You can also Google it, or DuckDuckGo it if you're on the web. And Donate Your Small Talk is this concept that instead of talking about when you get in the elevator at work, which we're all doing again, or starting a Zoom, and you ask, how was your weekend? What's your kid up to? What did you watch? No one actually cares. It's like filling dead space. What if instead, all across the country, we all donated that time, that small talk, and for a month, we talked about foster care? What if all of us donated our small talk? What if we looked up 3 fun facts, which are on my website? Like, did you know that 700 kids entered foster care today? Every day. What if we just started talking about something like that?
I don't know if it's a fun fact, but it's a fact.
Well, fair enough, man. Fair enough.
Give us other. Yes, I think that's a great idea. This should
Marilyn
be.
Monroe.
This should. Kid. Yes, like I didn't know all those people that you listed in the afterwords of your book. I knew about Steve Jobs and some of the major names, but a lot of the people. But I think a good social media campaign for this would be amazing with its own hashtag. It can take off and a movement can be created. And this does deserve its own light, its own space, its own movement. I'm really excited about this. I should be involved and do something with my own platform besides talking about this. Now my wheels are turning. But give us a few facts. Like you said, 700 kids are being placed in foster care every day. Give us some more so that people will be aware.
Well, I think the foster care system is in general thought of, and we all get like dark and morose when we talk about foster care. And because of that, people are alienated. And this is where I go back to when I think about breast cancer. Breast cancer is in and of itself kind of a dark topic, right? But today we think of women and people coming together with our sisters and brothers that experience breast cancer and marching and working together and wearing a color. And we're going to find the cure. We don't talk about death and mastectomy and bald. We talk about power and overcoming. What if we did the same with foster care? And the Donate Your Small Talk campaign, which is on my website as well, the PSAs, you'll see them. They're from Emmy award-winning ad agencies that do major products that have never been engaged to do communication around this topic before. And I have now come up through entertainment, and I thought, gosh, what if we use the same techniques and brought this Donate Your Small Talk campaign? What I consider fun is probably different than every listener. All of these are listed out on the website. So you can go there and kind of tool around and find out what strikes you. You just need to introduce any of this topic into your conversation. And November is Adoption Month. May is Foster Care Awareness Month. You could do it for an hour or a day. Every one of your Zooms that you're going to be on for a morning, why don't you start with like things you could say? And they're all listed out there because I think we need to de-shame this. And I'll just give you one final thing. Like you said, you stayed with family members, right? When you experienced the earthquake in Armenia. That's called kinship foster care. So you are a foster care alum, technically. Most foster kids may live with their biological family. It's still not your family. There's still a lot going on there. It's called kinship foster care. So when you start your calls tomorrow or your Zooms, did you know that I was in foster care? I found out yesterday. Isn't that crazy? I've been going around you look like you're 32. I've been going around for 32 years. I had no idea. And here, this guy yesterday on my podcast told me that. And I don't even get a t-shirt. Ha, ha, ha. Let's talk about it. Let's find our personal topic to talk about. Go to the website and just introduce it into our conversation. It's like coming out. I think about coming out. I'm a gay man. I've had to come out my entire life, various times, multiple times. We need to come out about this topic, all of us, because today you have a connection. If you're listening to this, you have a connection to a foster kid. If you're on your iPhone, you're Steve Jobs. If you like Marilyn Monroe, foster kid. If you look through the list of famous foster kids, Babe Ruth. If you're having good sex and you once read a column that she wrote, foster kid. Dr. Ruth, Babe Ruth, the baseball player, foster kid. There's so many people that have influenced our lives that when you think about it, it's like, wow, I did not know that. So pick 3, Willie Nelson, Tiffany Haddish. If you're entertained by these people, if you listen to Willie Nelson's music, if you smoke pot, which he's been an advocate for years, thank you, Willie Nelson, you could have fun with this topic. It is not dark and depressing. Kids and families are beautiful. They are a light. And the homeless kids across this country today, and kids going into foster care today, can be our children, and we could talk about them, remove the shame, and help them reach their full potential.
Yes, bravo. I agree and I support. Interestingly, I was thinking about this when I was reading your book, jumping to the homelessness part. When we walk on the streets, most of us, we pretend as if the homeless people are not there. Same is true as if we're closing our eyes, this issue of foster children, foster care, still there is, but we pretend it's not there. I think it's just this thing that we do as humans because we don't want to be involved. We don't want to feel the pain. I don't know why people do that. Like as a kid, when you were on the streets and people walk by as if you don't exist, like, why do you think that is? Like that we don't even acknowledge their humanness or their existence. We don't even want to look, right? But like why that is?
I think we're protecting ourselves. I think if we stared straight into that pain, that abyss, we would become overwhelmed because we are loving creatures. We don't want that person to be in that condition. We know that there's something wrong there. And we are loving creatures. We authentically care about each other as a species. And we have to avert our eyes or we'll become overwhelmed. But what I challenge folks to do is protect yourself, but look, be confronted and understand that you are responsible for your fellow human. And it doesn't mean you have to take them into your house. It doesn't mean you have to give up your income, but it means you have to care. You have to donate a small portion of your heart to realize that we have to take care of each other because God forbid that's you. But even if that's not the motivation, we should care. When I walk around the street, I know that it's not right to give money. I know that from a policy perspective, you should support policies and nonprofits. And I do. But when a child asks me for money, I can't walk by. And I give, and I understand it. And I understand all the different conversations we have. I'm not asking folks to do that. But instead of just ignoring, go home and Google homelessness and insert your town. Find a way that you can give $1, give a damn, care, do something. I am struck in LA. There's so much conversation around homelessness. And yet when I ask people who's responsible for it, they talk about the mayor. It's actually not the mayor. It's the county. The county has the budget, the power, the authority, et cetera, to deal with this issue. There's some responsibility, but it's almost all the county. I have maybe 1 out of 50 times met someone who can name their county supervisor. Here is the most pressing issue of our time, and people are averting their eyes. And yet we're not taking the personal responsibility to follow up and pay that bill for that privilege we have called this country, this life, our privilege, which is to be actively participating in our democracy and our republic. Look up who your county supervisor is. Attend a virtual meeting. They're all virtual now. Give some of yourself to fix this issue. And I know it's hard to look, but that's why you should look. Because I can tell you that, when I listen to the debate in this country around homelessness, and I'm in Los Angeles and I travel often to coastal cities and major cities in the middle, people talk about cleaning it up. And the book opens with us, and this part is not in the memoir, but we had been cleaned out of a public space where we were sleeping. And the book opens with my family almost dying of exposure that night. And you read that chapter. But the earlier part of that chapter that I did not write, because the book can't be 700 pages, was when they came through and cleaned us out and how my family almost died. We are not a people to be cleaned out or up. We're to be lifted up. We're to be loved up. We're to be included in the public conversation as a co-equal. I don't like when we avert our eyes. I understand, because we're putting that emotion in a clear box and putting it on a shelf so we can cope with our day. But we have to take it out and look at it and stare at it and deal with it. And if you can't do that, then you need to find a different way to contribute. And that may be public participation, donating, volunteering, whatever it is. It's not enough every few years to vote and rant within your community. You have to do something. I needed you to have done something. The kids today, there's millions of homeless children today. They need us to do something. And we damn well can. I'm always struck. We put a person on the moon. We can figure out homelessness in this country. We can do it.
Like you said, donate your heart. It doesn't take much, right? You can just donate your heart, a part of your heart, a part of your care. Wow, I love that. How old is your foster son?
Oh, he would kill me if I told you, but he's in his mid-20s and he's doing great. He's married. He's in grad school getting a Ptsd, and he is just a total love and made me and makes me a better man. I think kids in general challenge the hell out of us. I'm grateful for that challenge. And I think many people can't foster, and that's okay. That's okay. I want people to not walk away thinking they have to become an adoptive foster parent. You don't have to donate an organ. Well, maybe your heart, but you could do that in a way that keeps it in your body. And that's what this is all about, is to inspire people to move from empathy to action. And that action is whatever's right for you. But I encourage everyone to stretch a little bit, challenge ourselves to realize that we are paying morally and economically right now for a generation of families that are struggling through the most worst circumstances that don't have to be. This does not have to be the way it is. And it's a shame that 40 years into my life, 40 plus years, it is the same as when I was a kid. We can do better. We must do better. And that's why I'm showing my heart to everyone that reads this book, and everyone touched by someone who reads this book.
Yeah. Was it hard to write the book? I mean, how long did it take? What you went through? I can only imagine. Was it hard sharing the stories? I'm sure you probably never even talked about those stories out loud. Like, I haven't shared a lot of the stories. It's like you keep them inside, that they're wrapped in shame, and you want to distance yourself from those stories. They're there, but you hold them inside. Like, what was it like for you to put it out there openly like this? And you have some amazing memory, I have to say. That the way you write, it's so vivid and bright. It's like watching a movie. Seriously, you must have been an observant kid, very observant, and
Yeah. You
taking
asked
it
about what
all in.
skills.
Yeah,
That's about
that's
what skills come out of foster care. Well, you have to look at your environment and you have to understand your environment, and that never goes away. Writing the book was the hardest and most freeing thing that I've ever done. The most freeing thing I've ever done. Uh, we all walk away around this world. We all walk around. We're wounded animals, and that's okay. It's beautiful. It's the human condition, and it's what you choose to do with that pain and those experiences and that love. And for too long, I did not share any of that, and I walked around numb. That's how I always thought of it. And it didn't mean I didn't laugh. I didn't, enjoy myself or live, but I didn't live to the full. I
wholeheartedly,
lived,
as I say,
yeah,
wholeheartedly.
wholeheartedly. I lived some small measure of my potential. And putting down all of this does not mean I don't feel at times mortified. There's stories in there that are really painful. And there's some stories that didn't make it in there because they were too painful.
I am
But
also surprised that in America they let you publish like an honest and painful memoir like this, because it usually people censor. They don't want painful stuff to be out there. I've heard if it's too dark, I think Americans don't want to read or relate to that. Is that true?
well, my experience is that people want to connect to an authentic story, and all of us can see ourselves reflected in my book. All of us, I believe, have that connection. And there's a lot of joy in that book. There's a lot of love in that book. There's a lot of complicated relationships in that book. There's a lot of struggle, but overcoming in that book. And that is our story. I think of my life as some mix of Forrest Gump, Hillbilly Elegy, crashing into Precious. And I had a lot of great adventures, and they're in the book. I had a lot of fun in my life. And who doesn't have a complicated relationship with their mother? Please raise your hand if you're listening to this. It's bullshit. All of us have a complicated relationship with our mother, and that's okay. So perhaps, but I always knew that I was going to tell a damn authentic story, and I did. How do I feel? I feel like I have more space in my lungs when I breathe in deeply because I've removed those boxes. And it doesn't mean that the pain is not there. It doesn't mean that I love talking about some of these stories, but I know that someone needs to hear that you can overcome. I know that a person out there needs to see Holly, this beautiful human, salvage the remnants of a boy. I know that. I don't know if we got to it, but when I moved to Spain as a child.
No, I haven't. I haven't reached that point in the book yet. Yeah.
But there's a woman there that I live with. Her name was Gabriella, and Holly began a project. Gabriella continued the project. She was my host mom, and I moved there when I was 17. Long story, read the book, very funny story. And Gabriella looked at me and was like, I'm going to wrap you in Northern Spanish love and feed you and just love you wholeheartedly. And Spain is going to embrace you and heal you. And because I was in a different environment, learning a different language and culture that I'd never experienced before, I also started to learn something about myself, which is how to be vulnerable. And it was a 20-year project. Holly began it. Gabrielle continued it. I took up the mantle and did the hard work. But that's not depressing. It's beautiful. I've met some incredible humans that give me continued hope and gas in my tank to continue this work and to be one of them for other people. So no, I think this book is very uplifting. I think when you look at it from that lens and you see that I am so close to my brother and sister, we have a great relationship. I just think there's so many stories of love in the book that we can all relate to.
How about your mom? Does she know that you wrote this book?
Yeah. So my mom is continues to battle mental illness and my mom is one of those boxes that I think is still somewhat on the shelf because I have a responsibility to my mom, and
like you always did from in the book too.
Like I said, I think we all have complicated relationships with our mom, and you know what I think about my mom more than anything? I wish that God or the universe or whatever you believe, I wish that God would put his hand in her head and calm the voices and the delusions. And I wish I could have a conversation with her. And
what would you say? What would it be about?
I just want to tell her I'm sorry. I can't imagine the prison that she has experienced for her almost 80 plus years, what it's like to be in a prison of fear. She doesn't even know she's in it. And so I would love to talk with her and just hug her. And I'd love to hear her story and just learn more about her, because I see glimpses of her as I did throughout my life of who this person might have been. And mental illness is a horrible, robbing entity. It steals people from us. I love my mom profoundly, and I think about her all the time, even if I don't want to. And I would love to have that conversation with her. And there's so many people probably listening to this that have mental health issues in their family or their loved ones. And I'm sure many of us share that desire where we just wish we could heal something, like, cut it out or treat it or give it an antibiotic. And I think we're doing work to make mental health less stigmatized, but it's something that I think about all the time with my mom. And I have that image, and there's actually a foreword which didn't make it into the book, but it's actually that image of a fictional conversation I would have with my mom and what we would say to each other.
Oh, I'm sorry it didn't make to the book. I would have loved to read that.
Well, maybe there'll be a piece somewhere in a magazine someone will let me write, but it's it's something I think, like, when you lose somebody to death or you lose somebody to inaccessible, that we can all share the loss and what we would do if. And that's what I think about my mom, is how much I love her and how much I wish she could just have at least a normal day where she could be okay.
I know. I think it's the hardest when the person is alive, but you lost them. Some glimpses you get sometimes that come back of the true person that they are, or you want them to be, but they're gone most of the time. I think it's living with that loss over and over. It's must be so painful. Right, like dealing with the parental death. Like, I lost both of my parents, and thank you, I'm not 32. I would like to be 32. But I think parental loss is, like, I lost my mom when I was 13. It was a traumatic loss. But my dad, I just lost him to COVID last year. It wasn't traumatic, but it was painful, right? So, but living with a person who is there but not quite there, I just can't imagine that loss. I think it's so painful. I can't even imagine what it's like.
It is, but it also is. It's like, going to the gym to try and get big biceps. That work is developed a very strong muscle in me for empathy. It has developed a deep sense of love for people. And I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and everyone in my life will tell you. But the struggle with my mom and with these different characters in my life have made me a better person and made me the man that I am. And there's actually, as you saw in the opening of the book, is a dedication to my mom. And I say, to my mom, who taught me to forgive. And what a skill that is, right? So yes, it's painful, but it also makes us better people. Struggle is not a negative. Struggle is just a thing that we all do in different ways. And my struggle with my mom and her challenges has made me the man that I am. And I love who I am today. I love the work that I get to do. I love the family that I've created. And I love the world that I see in my head that I'm trying to make real.
Your mom is in you, she's part of you. Like, if you want to know who she is, you are her, and she's you, right? It's in you, I think. And you're right about empathy. Like, that deserves a whole different podcast. I've always wondered about this. People who come from a lot of hardship and early trauma and adversity, they are very empathetic and they feel pain and connect to other people. That ability is different. That's a superpower in and of itself. Like, I have that too, and I don't see it in quote unquote regular people who haven't gone through a tremendous hardship. Yes, they are empathetic people, but the quality of empathy that we're capable, I feel like it's always different. Like, or your empathy. I know, like, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know if I'm expressing this well, but that has been my experience and my observation.
I think I've realized that my outcome is an aberration, that too many foster kids and homeless children end up in dire circumstances, however one measures. And that privilege means that I have a bill to pay that I choose to take on, which is to in my way, using my skills and my humanity, make the world a better place as I see it. And I think folks that have faced challenges, that have developed that empathy, all of us have an opportunity to contribute something to make this a more humane world. And it doesn't mean you have to write a book. It doesn't mean you have to invent something and donate your small talk. It means all of us have a realization that we made it, that we're here, that life is precious, and that we have something to give back. And it may just be our own empathy and compassion to an individual that needs us at one particular moment, or maybe an orientation, like you give platform and you put us all on blast that are trying to do work around this type of subject. All of us have something different to give. And if you face adversity and you have that empathy muscle, deploy it, use it. It is not a burden, it's a gift. Every time I find myself in the arena of giving back, I find myself happier and better, however one measures that. Being vulnerable and sharing the stories in this memoir, A Place Called Home, I've never shared these stories. And now that I have, the people that have reached out to me and said, oh my gosh, and shared their story. I mean, first of all, I cry because I do. I'm a crier. But even you sharing your story, did you know you were a kinship foster kid? You and I are we're brother and sister. You're now on my list of people that have come through the world, through the system, and are now an alum. And because you're an alum, you need to reach back down out and help foster kids. I just think the empathy muscle and the empathy piece and the struggle that different people experience, all of us have our own Mount Everest, and it's all different sizes, but for us, it's Mount Everest. And once you climb it, you need to reach back down and help people up. And that is life. That is a beautiful part of life. And you are better for it. It is sometimes a cost. I don't want to be Pollyannish, but it also is where you find the most joy and the most reward, I believe.
Wow. I'm going to end it here because this is a beautiful place to end this conversation. Of course, I would love to talk to you about so many things. Thank you so much, David, for the book that you've written. You put yourself out there. And like you said, I found myself reflected in the pages of the book, in the stories. I didn't expect it to be so personal for me, but that's what's human about all of us, right? I see my story in you. I read your story and you hear my story. You find yourself, because it's all of our story. And to move it to all the foster kids are our kids. Our kids are not our kids. Those kids are also our kids. I think just like my story is your story is mine. The kids are also our kids. And I think we do have to care, and empathy comes with an action. What can we do? A small thing today, tomorrow, that can make a difference. I think it's so important. There shouldn't be children on the streets. I mean, come on, like, we live in this world, like you said, we put the man on the moon, we have iPhones and artificial intelligence, but we have hungry children who are on the streets. That shouldn't be there. That's a basic right. They should have a home and a place, right?
Yeah. I thank you for the conversation. Thank you for putting me on blast and giving me access to your listeners. And I hope folks will read the book and find out what they can do. I also read the audiobook. So if you enjoy the voice. I do. It's nice. I kept all the emotion in the audiobook.
That would be nice. Yeah.
It's funny. So I hope people will read it. I hope people will be inspired to do more than enjoy it, but to do something. And all of us can do something. That's what I hope people leave with. We as a people and as a country and as a world, we can do big things. This is not impossible. We can have healthy, thriving communities where children have their core needs met and they can reach their full potential. And I believe that so strongly to my core. I am an example of that. And I think there's millions of children that need us today to make that a reality. So thank you for the conversation. I hope folks enjoy A Place Called Home and share it with friends in their lives.
Thank you.